Hey everybody, Griffin Hales back here with you today. And today I have with me the Ride1UP LMT'D. Now this is a bike I was very excited to get into the shop, namely because it has an absolutely killer value proposition with some higher end componentry, but a lower price tag. Now part of the excitement here on this bike is of course it's spec'd with a new motor capable of 100 Newton meters of torque, and that has some higher end features as well, such as an air fork and a torque sensor as well. Very excited to show you everything this bike is capable of doing. So let's go ahead and dive into our review. Now for a lot of us, when we're buying any sort of product, like an e-bike or even something else, you can often kind of find products in three different price tiers, right? There's the affordable tier, there's the mid-tier, and the high-end premium tier. Now in the world of e-bikes, we consider affordable to be under $2,000, that mid-tier somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000, and then of course premium anywhere from $4,000 and up. And in the world of e-bikes, you can find some outrageously expensive bikes. I've seen $12,000 super commuters. Now while they're great and they give you a premium look and feel, most of us as shoppers are looking for the same thing. We're looking for lower prices, but something that feels like the quality and performance is a tier above. And that is what Ride1UP is setting out to do here with the LMT'D. They are trying to give you the absolute best value for your dollar and stretch it as far as it can go, keeping that low price tag, but giving you something that feels like a step above. I think they largely were able to pull that off here on this bike for a few different reasons. Now that always starts with the motor when it comes to e-bikes. Ride1UP has spec'd this with a 750 watt motor capable of 100 Newton meters of torque. Now that alone should make it pretty impressive when it comes to speeds and hills, but it's also not necessarily uncommon to find that type of motor on an affordable e-bike. What Ride1UP has done to make this feel more premium is they have paired this motor with a torque sensor. Now torque sensors give you a much more natural pedaling feel as opposed to their cadence sensor counterparts. A lot of cadence sensors function essentially like an on-off switch. Just as you start pedaling, it'll engage the motor. But this particular bike with that torque sensor gives you a much more natural feel. It feels like you and the bike are a little bit more in sync. As you go to pedal, you can feel your legs working, but you know the bike is helping take you over the top, which is a great, great feeling. Now, that's not the only way in which the LMT'D does a good job of giving you a more premium experience. There is also, of course, up here, a front suspension fork. But this one is air as opposed to a lot of coil spring forks we see on sub $2,000 bikes. Now, the combination of this means you get a fun, fast bike, great natural pedal experience, and very comfortable thanks to that fork up front. Now, there are certain things that might be missing from this, of course. It is a commuter style bike that does not come standard with racks or with fenders, but I think Ride1UP focused really on the ride itself, and I think it actually led to pretty wonderful results. So when I first took a look at this bike, I was surprised to see it wasn't going for well over $2,000, maybe even closer to $2,500. But as of right now, it is under that $2,000 mark. I think it's a pretty impressive achievement. Now, not only for these features, but even for more of the spec sheet. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the broader specs that you get here on the Ride1UP LMT'D. Now with the LMT'D, you're getting a very compelling spec package. Now that of course all starts with the bike itself, which is capable of class 3 speeds, meaning you can go up to 28 miles per hour when using the pedal assist and 20 miles per hour when using the throttle, which has a lever throttle on the left-hand side of the bike there. Again, it's a 750 watt motor, and that pairs with a 14 amp hour or 672 watt hour battery housed in the frame of the bike right there. That battery is removable if you want to take it off the bike to shave some of the weight, or if you would rather prefer to charge it off the bike as well, you have that option. Now, as for the stopping power of this bike, it is provided by Tektro hydraulic disc brakes on 180 millimeter rotors. These are dual piston disc brakes, which means when you squeeze the levers, you don't have to squeeze very hard, but stopping power will engage. It does have an electric cutoff as well, meaning the motor will kick out as soon as it feels you tug on the brake levers there. The brakes, I think, do very good on this bike. We'll look at that more later on with our brake test. Then, of course, there is the 80 millimeter air fork up front, which I mentioned before, which does have an adjustable lockout. And last but certainly not least, the Limited rides on WTB 27.5 by 2.4 inch wide tires. Now, I like these tires a lot. They are a good setup for road-based riding. I think they are wide enough to be comfortable. You can let a little bit of air out of them if you would like a little bit more of a cushy ride, but they do hold up pretty well. In about 100 miles of testing, I don't think we had any flats recorded on this bike, so they offer fairly good puncture resistance as well, at least from our testing. Now let's move up to the cockpit and kind of walk you through the layout that they have here. Now, Ride1UP has spec'd the Limited with a pair of high-rise handlebars. Now, it is worth noting that this is the handlebar setup you get for the high step frame. Ride1UP also offers the Limited in a step-through variant. With that one, though, you get a set of handlebars that's got a little bit more of a sweep back, kind of similar to what they've spec'd their Cafe Cruiser with, I believe. So just realize that there is a slight difference there as well. Now, here on either side of the handlebars, the grips on these I actually like a lot. They are very soft rubber, keeps things very comfortable. They even kind of have these wings that come down, giving you a wide platform to rest your palms on. Over the course of all of my riding, I was very comfortable and happy with these grips. I didn't feel like I'd swap these out. On the left-hand side, again, is the thumb throttle. I actually like this throttle. You can push it down a little bit to get a little bit of speed, push it all the way down to get a lot of motor assistance. It's really nice to see that you have a little bit of control over that instead of just all versus none. Now, on the left-hand side here is a colorful LCD display. It gives you all of your relevant information, such as your speed, how much battery you have left, your odometer, things of that nature. I also really love that they have a power meter showing you how much wattage the motor is producing at any given time. That's something I like to see. It just kind of gives me that idea of if I'm burning through a lot of battery power when I'm riding the motor hard, and then I can kind of know to maybe lower it down a pedal assist setting or two if I want to conserve battery. Now, the only thing that I don't love about the display is the fact that it is just a graphic of a battery showing you as it drains down. I always prefer to see percentage-based readouts. I just find them to be a little bit more accurate, and it helps me kind of gauge how much motor I should be using to get back home with plenty of battery left. Up front, you do have a headlight as well. On the right-hand side, there is an 8-speed Shimano shifter. Now, this all connects to the drivetrain, where you have a 44-tooth front chainring with an 11 to 32 gearing system here in the rear. I do actually like this gearing setup. It was pretty good at finding the right setting for me, where I could put in the amount of leg work that I wanted to. Again, where it is a torque sensor e-bike, that gearing really makes a huge difference. On cadence sensor e-bikes, oftentimes the cadence sensor is almost acting like an on-off switch for the motor, but this one is trying to be more in tune with how much pedaling effort you are putting out there and matching it with that amount of motor power, and I think it's a pretty good setup overall. It's on rapid fire shifters, of course, so it's really quick and convenient to change gears on the fly, and I think overall it's just a very well done setup here by Ride1UP. Now again, I think this is a very compelling spec package that they're offering you here. They have focused a lot of detail on giving you a little bit more on everything they do give you. Again, air fork over coil fork, 8th gear drivetrain versus a typical 7 that we see at this price. Everything's just a little bit extra, but it does mean they left a few things out. Now, for a Commuter, it does not come with any racks or fenders, something we typically see on a Commuter bike. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. They are trying to offer a really compelling price point, and that does mean you have to make cuts somewhere. It's just one thing to keep in mind. If that is something you're looking for, you will have to add those after checkout. And the only other thing worth noting is that this bike does require a little bit more DIY when it shows up to your door. Oftentimes with direct-to-consumer bikes, it's just a matter of putting on one wheel and you're good to go. This one requires a little bit more than that. Ride1UP tries to set you up for success though, as they do have a video of assembly that you can follow along if you are the do-it-yourself type. And if you're not, you can always check with your local bike shop to see if they can assemble it for you. Now, the spec package, like I said, I think is very good, but let's talk more about how it actually performs and feels by diving into our testing. So again, the Ride1UP Limited comes spec'd with Tektro HD M285 dual piston hydraulic disc brakes on 180mm rotors. Now, to better understand the braking performance of this brake setup, we took this bike out into our brake test. Now here at EBR, what we do is we bring the bike up to 20 miles per hour before performing a stop, while remaining seated in the saddle and keeping the bike in as much control as possible. We do this test multiple times so that we can take an average stopping distance and evaluate the results. So here on the Limited, we got an average stopping distance of 22 feet and 6 inches. Now that is right in line with the new average we've been establishing over the last few months. Again, if you've seen EBR reviews, we used to get out of the saddle and throw our weight all the way back in kind of a panic stop. We realize that's not reflective of how the average rider will ride this bike. So right now we're seeing averages closer to 21 or 22 feet, and that is coming in just right around that. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how the bike was able to stop, namely because when I do hit those brakes, it does not lock the wheel up and send it into a skid. It just does a really good job of grabbing onto that tire and slowing it down. Makes it much easier to remain in control for your average rider. Now, not only that, but I do like the fact that it is Tektro brakes spec'd on this bike. We test a lot of different brands, and we found that Tektros are usually the ones that hold up the best and require the least amount of servicing. So again, I like the parts pick here. Overall, pretty happy with the braking performance on the Limited. For our next test, we wanted to see the speed distribution profile here on the Limited. So we took it out to the EBR circuit. Now for our circuit test, what it is, it's a 1 mile loop consisting of 4 right-hand turns and a small 30-foot climb. Now we do this test multiple times. We do it once without any motor assistance at all, and once in each of the 5 levels of pedal assistance here on the Limited. Now again, we're trying to see the overall speed profile breakdown and get a better sense of how much that motor helps you at each of the different pedal assist levels. I was actually really happy with how that test played out. Starting things off with no motor assistance at all, I was able to get about 13 miles per hour on my first lap's average. From there, we saw a pretty substantial jump going up to 16.8 miles per hour. And then I saw that 1.5 to 2.5-ish speed increase across every level of pedal assist, which is what I'm always hoping to see, all the way up to 22.5 miles per hour. Now, a couple more thoughts on this particular test. Number one, it was a wonderfully engaging motor. Now what I mean by that is, again, with that torque sensor as opposed to a cadence sensor, it is something that as soon as you're applying power to the pedals, it can kind of measure that and get a sense of how hard you are trying and how much more it needs to help you. It makes it a wonderful overall experience, and it really helps dial things in on the acceleration side. With some cadence sensors, again, they function almost kind of like an on-off switch, and when you get into those higher pedal assist levels, when it is hitting on and trying to give you all 750 watts at once, you start flying. This one, however, does a good job of ramping you up, so it will help you achieve higher speeds, but it gets you there in a more comfortable and controlled way. Now again, the other thing I wanted to point out from this test is I think the gearing on this bike is done really well. We see a lot of bikes that are in the affordable category that have 7 speeds and sometimes just don't have the right gearing range that will inevitably lead to some amount of ghost pedaling when you're trying to achieve higher speeds, which is where you're pedaling but not really contributing much. It just feels like the bike takes over. But at no point over the course of my testing with the Limited did it ever feel that way. It feels like you are constantly in sync with the bike trying to achieve those speeds, which is just a wonderful overall experience. Now, of course, if you're looking at getting an e-bike, you have the question in your head already, how far can I go with that bike? So here at EBR, we do a range test. And we do this 2 different times. We do it once on the maximum level of pedal assist and once on the lowest level of pedal assist. We do it twice so that you can kind of establish those bookend values depending on how much motor usage you are using. Now again, the Limited comes with a 750 watt motor and a 14 amp hour or 672 watt hour battery. Now typically when we see a motor that is larger than the watt hour size of the battery, we expect shorter rides. But again, part of the magic of the torque sensor on here is it can actually draw that power a little bit more efficiently by not just giving you full bore at any one given time, but actually matching how much pedal effort you're putting into it. And we saw that efficiency ring true through our range tests. On the PAS 5 test, we got 37 miles of distance. The PAS 1, we got 51. Now that is overall pretty good range that I'm very happy with for a number of different reasons. First of all, Ride1UP on their website claims a 30 to 50 mile average. So I always love to see when brands are quoting something that proves true in our testing. But not only that, I think that is plenty of mileage for people to go a day or 2 at a time without having to worry about charging the bike. Not only that, but as you saw in our circuit test, PAS 1 gives you noticeable speed increases. It does really help you out overall. It's not just humming along quietly in the distance, but it is actually giving you better speeds and just, again, providing that wonderful pedaling experience I've already touched on. So knowing that you can go 37 miles with true assistance from a bike is great, and up to 51 is even better. I think people are going to be pretty happy overall with the battery life afforded them on the Limited here. The only other thing worth noting when it comes to the range on this bike is, again, I think it's overall fairly comfortable. I like the grips on here. They're the type that I think I'd probably keep and not look to swap out. The air fork, as I mentioned, really helps smoothen out any bumps in the ride. The only thing I think that would maybe want to change it could be the saddle. The saddle was more comfortable than I thought it was going to be at first glance, and it holds up well over the course of, say, 10, 12, 15 miles or so. But if you are someone who's going to look to go on a very long bike ride, I do think after a while you might want to saddle maybe a little bit more to your liking, which is fairly easy enough and affordable enough to swap out if you should so choose. For our final test, we have the hill test. Now here at EBR, with each bike we review, we take it out to a local steep, dubbed affectionately as Hellhole. Hellhole is about 1/3 of a mile long with a 12% average grade. This is a very steep and extreme example of a hill you might come across while out riding, but we chose it specifically because we want to put motors to their absolute limit. Again, the Limited comes with a 750 watt motor capable of 100 Newton meters of torque, which means it should be the capable climber, and that is largely what we found to be true through our testing. Now, it's a test we did twice. We did it once on maximum pedal assistance and once on throttle only, allowing the bike to do all the work. And what we saw was a time of 134 and 11.5 miles per hour on the throttle test, with 121 and 13.4 miles per hour on the pedal assist test. Now, I'm very happy with these results for a few different reasons. First of all, if you're comparing this to any other reviews we've done here at EBR, you will quickly see that those averages are about middle of the pack, but that does not tell the full story of this bike. Again, whereas a torque sensor versus a cadence sensor, it does make a world of difference, and it does change up how you attack these hills. It's worth noting that you don't get to the top as quickly as you might on some cadence sensor e-bikes, but you are able to really get to the top of the hill yourself without breaking a sweat, thanks to how the motor helps you and gives you assistance as you are putting your own personal torque down through those pedals. Now, not only that, but the theme of this bike from the get-go has been Ride1UP trying to deliver a bike that is a performance tier above its price tier, and that rings true here on this bike as well. I actually just wrapped a review last week for a different bike that costs twice as much as this and has a different motor, but it's also a mid-drive and a torque sensor and a lot of other things. These had actually identical results in terms of time, and while that other bike probably had a slightly better feel, I still love the feeling that you get when doing hills on this bike. The gearing offered on it allows you to really choose the gear that is best for you instead of necessitating you go down to first gear to just ride it in slowest. You can actually take advantage of the 8 gears offered you here, and that is wonderful to see. Overall, I think this bike performs very well on hills, and people will be pretty satisfied with how it can do for them. So here is my biggest takeaway from my time with the Ride1UP Limited. It is a bike that comes in at a sub $2,000 price point, but easily feels like it should cost $2,500 or more. It feels like left and right with the features. It just feels a step above what most bikes are offering at this price. You get 8 gears instead of 7. You get a torque sensor versus a cadence sensor. You get an air fork instead of a spring fork. It just feels like a more premium ride than what you're paying for, which is what most shoppers are kind of hoping to achieve. And that, of course, all pairs with the fact that it has a very fun and fast motor that's wonderful on hills and a very efficient all-day battery life setup as well. I think the value here is very apparent and just feels like a home run. Now, of course, in order to offer such great value, it does mean that certain things were left out. We do not have fenders or a rear rack, which often comes standard with a commuter style bike. And while you do have a headlight, you don't have an integrated taillight, which would have been nice to see. But at the end of the day, those are things that you can easily find online, either through Ride1UP or elsewhere, that you can add to this bike if you want to give it the complete commuter package. But what Ride1UP has focused on is delivering the best of what the features are that they give you, and it does add up to a wonderful feeling bike. I am the type of person who would probably, if I were looking to buy an e-bike for me, I would probably be looking at something like the Limited. Just getting that awesome value without feeling like you pay a lot of money always feels so good. It's a bike that I could recommend to anybody. Now, if you found this review helpful, please give this video a like. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the Electric Bike Report channel. And for more on the data we collected, as well as the spec breakdown, you'll find that back at the EBR website, along with a link for pricing in the video description down below. Again, I'm Griffin with EBR, and thank you, and we'll see you on our next review.